everyone. So I'm reviewing All Eyez On Me by Morgan Creek Pictures and Voltage Pictures. It was directed by Benny Boom. It had Demetrius Shipp Jr. as Tupac Shakur, Denai Guerrera as Afeni Shakur. It also starred Jamie Hector and Jamal Woolard, who was Christopher Wallace in the actual Notorious B.I.G. movie that came out in 2009. It also had Dominic El Santana, who played Suge Knight, or Suge Knight, Kat Graham as Jada Pinkett, Annie Alonze as Kidada Jones. So anyway, it had a whole bunch of people that aren't very familiar to A-list or big budget movies. This movie cost $60 million to make, and if you compare that to other movies that are biopics, it's pretty substantial difference. This movie had a lot of backing behind it. It spent really long time in the pre-production phase, a lot of contract negotiations, a lot of disputes, a lot of attempted lawsuits between companies, and a lot of changes of directors. There were about 4 different directors before Benny Boom was decided on. And yeah, the movie is a biopic. I guess I'll just give my review for the movie. I thought it was a 5 out of 10. I'm very disappointed with this movie for a couple of reasons. Let's look at it on a comparison basis. Notorious, that came out in 2009, it had a budget of $20 million. It grossed $40 million. For one, it had actors in it that looked like the actors. Demetrius Shipp Jr. looks nothing like Tupac. I don't care what anybody says. He looks nothing like him. And fine if they had chosen to direct the movie in a different way, if they had used long distance framing, if they hadn't been so close up with every shot. The decision to make it some kind of daytime soap opera with just a whole bunch of exposition that just follows from one scene to another, with people meeting in a room, or people meeting in a walkway, or people meeting in a street, and then all of a sudden just doing all this exposition that crams a whole bunch of his life story in as if it's, you know, just a couple of meetings between people. That was the crux of who this guy was. I think that the movie really didn't capture who Tupac Shakur was, and if you walk away from this movie never having lived in a time when Tupac was the star that he was, you would think that there was no difference between him and someone like Chief Keef, or someone like Gucci Mane, or someone like Young Thug, or someone like Lil Bow Wow even. I mean, the guy was nothing like any of those kinds of people, despite what this movie says about him being a conflicted revolutionary. The pushes that he made in terms of storytelling, in terms of poetry, in terms of lyricism, in terms of delivery, it was so unique. And the movie didn't touch on his influences. The movie didn't touch on how he influenced other artists. It didn't touch on what his impact on the present generation of his time was. It didn't touch on what his impact on future generations was. It didn't even have any storytelling about what the community felt about his music. Like, it was so introspective, this film. It was like a over-the-shoulder follow-through of this guy through 2.5 hours, which felt really long. The movie felt like a 2.5 hour film every minute of the way. It was lazy. It just felt like a really extended music video. We were just going from YouTube video to YouTube video to YouTube video with a bit of dialogue meshed between every jump. And when you see this movie in real time, you're going to be thinking, that was good, oh, that was good, oh, that was good. But then if you actually compare it to other biopics, because when you look at a movie like Gandhi, that was directed by Richard Attenborough for $20 million, and it was amazing. I mean, I'm sure that there's some purists and there's some historians and there are some people of Indian nationality that would say that that movie overlooked a lot of aspects of that man's life, but that movie left you feeling and understanding, at the very least, the impact that this person had on culture. This movie makes it seem like Tupac was just a run-of-the-mill wannabe gangbanger that made some hits, and that wasn't his only contribution to the lexicon of rap, of hip-hop, of R&B. Benny Boom, I don't know why they went with this guy. A suggestion that I would have given, Antoine Fuqua, the very first guy that they had on board, the director of Training Day, the director of Tears of the Sun. He's done great work, and he's worked with actors that were cast very well. So whenever you have a director like that, it usually means that there's some behind the scenes strings being pulled that make it so that that movie has the best chance to succeed. Benny Boom, never heard of him And when I looked him up, it looked like he just had a bunch of music videos under his belt. That's really good for him. But just because you've directed a whole bunch of music videos doesn't mean that you are going to give a great effort when it comes to like a biopic. And this didn't even feel like a biopic, as I said. It felt like an addition to a Wikipedia page. It didn't, like, I don't know what to say. I'm at a loss for words just because this movie was so bad. Kat Graham, who played Jada Pinkett, she looked nothing like Jada Pinkett. And I know I keep saying that they look nothing like these people, but I just don't understand why they didn't use prosthetics or do some enhancements or spend more time casting. I don't even know why they chose to use Jada Pinkett's involvement in his life as a jump-off point in this movie. Her own words, there was no romantic affiliation with Tupac. So I don't know why they would choose her. Like, why wouldn't they choose Janet Jackson? Why wouldn't they choose any of the actors that he was ever involved with in his time in Hollywood? Why choose Jada Pinkett? I mean, she's come out after this movie saying that pretty much none of the scenes that they had in this film were factual. There was nothing factual about any of this stuff, so I just don't know why they would do that. The music score. It's great that they used his music. Tupac's music is iconic, and it was very apt for scenes in the movie. It was very appropriate, but the composer in this movie didn't pull his weight at all. They just decided to use a whole bunch of excerpts from his songs that were the biggest hits at the time. I think that one of the most compelling elements to this film was his relationship with his mother. I think that she was one of the most interesting and compelling characters in this film. And if you're going to use his music, why not use it at the best time? Why not make it so that the movie has the ending, Bring Out Unconditional Love or Dear Mama? This wasn't the Tupac movie that we were looking for. I don't think so. I mean, I just don't know why you would sink $60 million into a movie and get this as your product. There was a scene in this movie where he meets Ayanna Jackson, right? So she's someone who wants to be with him in a big way, and they meet in a club and he's attracted to her, and then instead of doing something tasteful, like, they do this fucking like a thing that would come right out of It's Getting Hot in Here, or just something really, crass, where she grinds up against Tupac in a club and then gives him head and he's smoking a blunt, but the background music is meant to make it seem like it was a very romantic endeavor, and it's just like, what the fuck is this? Like, this director, I don't know what he was thinking. Like, I mean, I don't know what the production company was thinking. I don't know why they wouldn't go back and do, I don't know. People greenlit this just so that they could get a Tupac movie out there. Here's a good example, okay? So Hill Harper, he's playing this interviewer who comes in to play devil's advocate with a whole bunch of periods of time in Tupac's life. He's doing this really biographical expose, and he comes in and there's like this scene where they're stood out on a grassy knoll somewhere, and he's saying to him, the FBI has a 4,000-page dossier on you. And Tupac says, yeah, of course they do. And then they just move on to another issue, but like, that's, I mean, a 4,000-page dossier. Why is that not being talked about? Why is the fact that the FBI had surveillance on this man pretty much his whole life being overlooked? They have so much footage, they have so much documentation, they have so much information, and they gloss over what really happened in the sexual abuse case. They gloss over who actually killed him. I don't mean like, did the FBI, did the CIA, was it gang related, was it West Coast, East Coast affiliated? I don't mean that. I mean I'm not saying that it should have gone conspiratorial or anything like that, but I think that details like that should have been examined more thoroughly, and they weren't. And people might say, oh, we're just looking for a good time in these movies. You may be, but when I watch a movie like The Doors or JFK, both movies by Oliver Stone, the one thing you can't fault that director on is his research, is his attention to detail, is his perfectionist drive to actually get something to the audience that, first of all, they weren't ready for, and second of all, leaves them with a whole bunch of wheels turning, like the machinations are just moving, and you've just got thoughts about the issue. Like, I had no thoughts about this Tupac movie except disappointment and anger at the fact that they didn't do the homework. They didn't do the research. They didn't put any effort in. They had a whole bunch of licensing for music, and they put it in a movie that makes it seem like it's just a 3-hour-long concert with a bit of backstage access. It doesn't give you the idea that he was a leader of a revolutionary moment in time in gangster rap. It doesn't show the impact that he had on culture. It glosses over a whole bunch of issues that would have made this a movie that is way more hard-hitting, and that all had to do with the choice of director. Benny Boom should not have been the director for this movie. Demetrius Shipp Jr., personally, he looked nothing like Tupac, and they should have casted harder. I don't know where the $60 million went. The music, of course, it's going to be good because it's his music and they overlaid it throughout this movie. Snoop Dogg, I think Snoop Dogg, I have a feeling that they actually called in a favor and had Snoop Dogg do some overdubbing with his actual voice in this because it sounded like him. I also think that it was a good choice to bring Jamal Woolard from 2009 Notorious into this movie because it lent a bit more authenticity to this as an installment in a universe of rap-themed biopics, but they're not putting enough foresight into these movies. I think that they're treating them too much like R&B music videos. They're not taking this as an advantage to tell stories about black people or black culture as well as they could. Look at a movie like the Malcolm X movie, X, that movie by Spike Lee. The way that movie is told, it has two sections. It has the beginning section where it's more comedic and not as serious, and I don't like that section, but then it has the second section of the film which is cold as ice. It's very interesting, like it's a very exciting point in that movie, and I don't like the way that he chose to make the movie that way, like having a lighthearted section and then a more hard-hitting section, but I understand why he did it, and it drives the film. And that's a movie about a leader in black culture that is interesting. I mean, you can go back to that movie right now and you could enjoy it. You could enjoy the depiction of Malcolm X, Malcolm Little by Denzel Washington, and I don't think you could do that with this movie. I mean, who the fuck is Demetrius Shipp Jr.? Are you just gonna get a dude just because you think he looks like him, or are you gonna get a dude who actually looks like him? I guess I'm just looking at this movie as a real disappointment and just shitting on everything at the moment, but the music was good but used in a bad way. The directing was poor and not thought out well enough. The actors, all of them played their parts well, but some of them were very miscast. I should have known that it wasn't going to be enjoyable from the previews. I wasn't enjoying the previews. And I think if there was ever a time to actually do a reboot of something, it would be a movie like this, and not now, because I think that the critical reception of this movie is very poor. But this is the kind of movie that deserves a better effort. Yeah, because this wasn't the movie that I was hoping for at all. And I didn't even realize that I was hoping for a movie about Tupac, but when a movie like that comes out, I'll be there because it has something to do with my childhood. This guy, had such a deep effect on me and my upbringing with the music that he was creating, just giving people goosebumps, giving me goosebumps, showing you another side of a world, both the light and the dark, and showing you that what ties it all together is you and the way that you're coming at these moments in your life and growing stronger mentally, physically, those kinds of things. I mean, if you are someone who looks to the arts for inspiration, you could definitely say that Tupac Shakur was one, and this movie treated his character like some kind of dude who has released one album and then, blew up, and they decided to make a movie about him. I mean, he's not a fucking 50 Cent. He's not a fucking Eminem. Tupac Shakur deserved better than this movie, in my opinion, so I definitely wouldn't recommend watching it. And if you do, I imagine that you're not going to enjoy it. If you actually enjoyed this man's legacy, I feel like this movie is going to be disappointing. So yeah, 5 out of 10 for me. Worst movie that I've watched so far this year. So yeah. See ya.